Hello guys, this is leathertoolz. Today I'm to talk about my thoughts on handmade tools. This is such a great topic to talk about between the makers. I do the leather work, I do the knife making, I also make my tools as well. And I recently had my thoughts on what's it good for handmade tools. Is it really better, or if it's leather work, is it better if it's handmade? So it's something to talk about, and I would be really interested to hear your opinions down in the comment box. So if you have any other opinion, please share with us. So two hammers now you're looking at is a George Barnsley shoe hammers. There are many different types according to the lot of books and catalogs from the past, but the hammers that you're looking at is a very interesting pattern. This is English pattern that has a two face. You have a large face and smaller face. Also this one as well. And definitely you can see the size of two different hammers. Don't think about the handles yet. It's something that I want to talk about in different videos. This one is original handle, which has been stored in a beautiful condition. This one is obviously modified or new handle that maker tried to fit in because the handle was broken or wanted to make a shorter handle or whatever. So just focus on the head part. So this is number 2 size and this is number 3, and you can see definitely a huge change between the hammer head size on both sides. Here the difference is not so big as this side, but it's quite huge hammer. Personally, I think number 2 is the go-to size for shoemaking for me. Number 3 is fairly large. The head diameter is about 5 centimeter, so it's a very large hammer. Haven't weighed it yet because I need to do some handle making as well, but it's really heavy hammer, so it gives you very hefty blow if you do the hand shoemaking. I'm sure there will be a useful application because there's such a large face. But then I've noticed that the hammer is stamped with the numbers. So if I show you the number 2 hammer first, yeah, it says number 2 with the George Barnsley stamp mark. There's nothing on the other side. This one has number 3. It has George Barnsley mark and also says solid steel. Back in the times, steels were recently produced, like it was a new thing, having a solid steel or a forged steel, so they have put it as a solid steel, as it meant as to it was not a cast steel, it was steel that is very solid, so it meant solid steel. So that's how it stamped it, but I wanted to focus on this numbering system. So you may find a lot of numbering system in your leatherworking tools as well. Your paring knife also has numbering system. Typical one is number 1, number 2 is a wider, number 3 is even wider. And there is a reason why they put numbers instead of exact millimeter sizes. You could go say 30 millimeter or 40 millimeter or 50 millimeter, and they also could have put the weight to these hammers. You could have put it 400 grams or 500 grams or 600 grams, which will indicate the weight of these tools. They stamped it just because they wanted to give a room for error for the hand forgers or the makers. So instead of putting the exact number to the hammer, which let's say 2 makes it 200 grams, let's say, just example, and the maker who have to forge this hammer needs to make a correct dimension, size and everything, also to have to match the weight. And that is extremely difficult if you have a forged hammer handle, hammer head, or any of the tools that has a certain shape and the length, also thickness. You have to match everything perfect to get that right weight. So they just put the number 2, and they wanted to just narrow it down to a certain length and the hammer head diameter and also the width, just around that, and they just wanted to label as number 2. So it will be a large tool makers. There will be many tool makers who produce these hammers, and every one of them will have a different characteristic because they are all human. They cannot make everything exactly the same, so they just put number 2, so they had a room for error. Number 3 is of course the same. They just wanted to make it larger, but they didn't want to give the exact number to the forgers so that they have a room for error. So that's number 3. Now this gives the really the interesting aspect of the tool making. So as a maker perspective, there won't be such a stressed out in a way that they have to match the exact perfect weight when they're making the hammers. So it will be a less stressful for the workers, and the handmade effect really gives into this numbering system. So if it's numbered, that also could mean it's a handmade tools. Now it's not always the case, because they are still maybe do the numbering system, but then they will just produce in a large automated hammers, but then just wanted to keep the system. It could be that way, but oftentimes when you find antique tools with numbers on them, it means it's a handmade tools. So you can see this culture of making tools and how they're used. So if you are buying the hammer or any tools, you will just feel that, oh, it's around this range. Yeah. So now you also have a room for adjustment as well. So you can adjust the hammer or tools to your likings. So it's a interesting topic to think about. If it's a handmade tools, there's always room for a little bit of play. Yeah. However, the recent hammers that made are like this. For example, it's a very this is French hammer repeating hammer, and you can see there's a groove, also certain shape to the head, but then it has a certain way of manufacturing that it stays in within dimension, very stable. This is a bit complex, but this one is not. So rather you have a very stable range of how you make the hammer. So that's why they can tell the size of the hammer in millimeter wise. This is 35 millimeter one. Then also they can tell you how heavy this is, exact number. This is around 700 gram, between 700 gram to 800 gram. They told me in the description sheet, I think they labeled as 790 gram. So if manufacturer tells you that, it also means, you know, they have to guarantee the weight of it, and they can control this because they produce in certain way of manufacturing with automated machine and automated forging machine to forge it into a certain shape. So machine made stuff, the good way is that you always have a consistent quality and also consistent shape, so you can always rely on next hammer you buy, it will be the exact same. Yeah. So speaking of consistency, I want to give you one other example that is also always beneficial if you're doing this handmade. So this is rasps. So these are the tools that you need to use to shape the wood handle. You can use the sandpaper, but then sandpaper, it does more of a smoothing work. These are used for removing the wood very fast. So you hog out the wood material very fast with using rasp. It also gives a teared apart, tearing look, because the surface will be really rough, and you can also smooth it with a plane. And there's a reason why hand stitched rasp is much better than the machine ones. So this is just an example that I want to show you. Don't think about the size of the rasp. This one is much larger because it's just a larger size. This one is smaller. It has nothing to do with handmade. Just size is just a coincidence. So that's what I have in my hand. This is made in Japan, and this is made in England. This is also George Barnsley rasp. This used to be handmade back in the days. Of course, that's the only way to make the rasp. But recently, they also have come up with a way to produce it with machine very fast. So if you see this rasp, which is machine made, you can see this very consistent pattern to it. So this line shifted to the right side, right? And then next line also shifted to the left side, and it just shows the consistent quality. So it has a consistent teeth to each line. So it just it shows it's a nice neat look. Yeah. But then what happens if you use it on wood? If you shape it, these teeth will carve out the wood, and next line, which is skip this second line, third line, this place will also scoop the wood. So this exact two alignment of these two teeth will give the same spot of taking out the wood. So in file work it could be the nice way, but then for the woodworking this could be a troublesome, because you're not really leaving the consistent mark, or you're not really helping to carve out the wood as efficiently as the handmade tools, because they are randomly patterned. So if you look at the handmade rasp, if you see that this pattern is so random, right? Because human hands and eyes are not like a machine. They are not really coordinated to have a same exact spot. The next line and the next line, they're just they are trying to be in a straight line to the next line, but then they had aligned these teeth almost random pattern, yeah, almost. So that means if the one teeth digs out wood, the next line and the next line is not aligned to each other. So this line is not straight. So this goes to jagged way up to here. So this gives you a consistent result when you remove wood. So hand stitched rasp is much better than these factory made ones, because it has random pattern. I'm not sure why, but random patterns are not put it into machine made mass produced rasp. It just shows this consistent way of manufacturing. It's just the same pattern, just the right, left and the right way. This one is just a straight, but then it's like has a random pattern. It gives you a much nice result. I can't show you it in front of camera with the close-up. Sorry, I'm in right now. The situation is that you have to stay inside. So, but then it does what it does. So that's why hand stitched rasp is much more expensive, and it's much more meaningful than the machine made ones. So it's definitely worth to invest in handmade stuff in this regard. Yeah. So if we really talk again about these things together, so you are not actually gaining any profits if you are hand making the hammer. So it's just a hammer is hammer. So you hit down things. You can just hit with a rock, of course, but it's just that keeps the feeling that these are hand forged from the master forgers back in the days. These are, I think, more than 100 years old. So it's just a thing that if it's a handmade, it has a certain aspect to it, and if it's a handmade, it's also better than the machine ones. So if you're making leather goods, think about it. Like, is it better than Chinese made ones? Always people complain about made in China products, or they always complain about how poorly or machine made stuff are inferior to the handmade goods. But if you really think it, is it really better if it's a handmade? If it's not, you should really also think about if it's better with machine, or if it's not worth it with handmade. You also think about how to go mass produced, or how to go with the modern way of manufacturing things. But if it's worth it, if it's handmade, has a better aspect in a certain way or reason, that you go for the handmade stuff. So handmade stuff is not always better than the machine made stuff. There's a difference in a situation where handmade stuff is actually worth it. So for me, I think I have to really think about it. If it's handmade is better or machine made is better. You know, there's always something to think about when you make things. If you are trying to sell it, if you turn it into business, it's something to think about as well. So that was just my thoughts on handmade leather goods or handmade tools. So if you are interested into this topic, please share it with us down in the comments, and I will see you guys next video. Bye bye.